I finished putting this clean screen cover back on, reinstalled handles, cleaned up the base, and have it all back together and playing now. Hey guys, welcome to the start of another project. This time it is going to be the final Predicta from the East Coast collection I got September of 2029. If you recall, a whole trailer load of Predictas, one Zenith porthole, and one Dumont, see the chassis for it right there, arrived, all for me to restore, and I had 1 year to do it. It looks like I'm going to make it, except for the Dumont. There's just too many issues with it. But anyway, this is the last of the Predictas. It's a Tandem model. Nice blonde cabinet down here. Now, this is interesting because it's been previously worked on, restored, you might say. And I thought this was an interesting opportunity to see what may have failed and also how it was restored in the past. This is not meant as a criticism at all. It's more just to see another way of doing things, and I'll show you how I will do them differently or what I might have done differently. I'm going to try to also figure out when it was done, if I can find some date codes on some of the newer parts. The owner bought this as a restored set, and I guess it worked for a while, then it just stopped working one day. Now, to be really fair, things have changed a lot in, say, the last 10 years, and dramatically so in the last 20 years in terms of sharing of knowledge, availability of knowledge. So, of course, there's YouTube channels like mine and Shango's and others that work on vintage electronics and share the knowledge. And there's Facebook groups, and there's online forums. Like the Antique Radio Forum is probably the oldest one that I regularly use. But prior to that, how the heck would you go about restoring a vintage TV? You'd kind of be on your own. You could maybe go to your local antique radio club, talk to hams, pick up old books, old magazines, and maybe get a copy of Sam's Photo Fact, and you were kind of on your own. Nowadays, geez, you can 3D print a knob, you can ask questions online, some reproduction parts are available, and you can certainly now search on, say, eBay to find new old stock parts you might need, plenty of tube vendors, and so on. The reproduction couplates are available now, or reproduction decals. It's an interesting time. On the flip side, you can't get picture tubes rebuilt anymore. 20 years ago you could. So not everything is all rosy, but anyway. So let's take a quick look at what has been done. So right away we can see we have some new yellow caps here. And some of these are pretty good quality. That's an Illinois capacitor. I use those to this day, and that look kind of familiar. I think I've bought parts like that before, sort of no-name generic caps. That one threw me off. That is a polystyrene cap. I'm not really sure why they would use that other than that's what they had. Now here's another factor too. Values on these has gone up and down over the years. Right now things have been red hot the past few years, which is why there are things like reproduction parts being made for these, because there's a really high interest level. In the past, at various times, it was not as big a deal, so somebody would not, it'd be hard to justify as putting as much time and effort into restoring it when the value's low versus when it's high. So they did remove the board. Didn't do the greatest job reconnecting it. Some of the wires, it looks kind of ugly. I think maybe what they did, I've seen this plenty of times before, is they disconnected stuff on this side, which allowed them to tip it up this way. Because it looks like most of these, or maybe none of these, have been removed. That looks like it's been resoldered. But if you look on the other side, we see some real ugliness like that, where the wire was unwrapped, cut off, and just like one loop maybe, and then a blob of solder. See the same thing down here. Yeah, they're attached. They're there. But not really this most secure connection. Soldering is crude too. These look like cold solder joints. This fusible resistor looks a bit corroded. That could be an issue as to why it stopped working. These caps, MEIC, 105 degree. I don't know if you can get those anymore. You can get 85C axial caps. Or sorry, did I say MEI? I mean MIEC. I'm not sure exactly who that is, but I've purchased some in the past. It's generic Chinese capacitor. They work fine. I don't know exactly what the specs are for them. I don't think they're published, but you know, they're probably still more or less okay. So they replaced the paper caps. They replaced a couple resistors. Didn't replace any of the couplates. That's all I can tell from the top side. Other than, obviously, there's two new electrolytics here. Let's take a look underneath. They did do more extensive work down below, not surprising. It's traditional terminal strip and easier to get at things. So, looks like, again, all the paper caps are gone. They use these yellow guys. ETR, Illinois capacitor, ETR, MAT. I get caps like this these days as well. Looks like all the rest are all these MIEC 105C. This is the most interesting thing I saw. So originally there's a big old sand-coated tapped power resistor in here. They replaced it with a whole bunch of little power resistors. These are the cheapest kind of power resistors the money can buy. These ceramic types. The values look wrong, but I have to do some math because some of these are in parallel, but normally it'd be a 17 ohm, a 13 ohm, and an 8 ohm. Okay, they do have two 4s in series. That would be 8. Looks like we have a 20 in parallel with a 35, and then a 40 in parallel with a 35. I think the wattage is a little low on some of these. So you put two 5s, they were equal value. That'd be a 10 watt resistor, a 10 watt resistor. I use more like 15 watt resistors. The thermistor, they used the CL90. It's really not the greatest thing. The original was, I think, 400 ohms cold, maybe 5 ohms hot. This is 120 cold and around 5 hot, especially with only 0.6 amps running through it. So Amitherm makes a better replacement for that these days. I'll have to double check all these caps to see if they're the right values. The same across the board, the plastic film and the electrolytics. Looks like they really didn't replace any of the resistors at all. But not a terrible job by any stretch. I've seen way worse. The only thing that looks bad is the soldering on the top side on that circuit board. So, what would I do differently? Well, as I mentioned, Amitherm makes a 220 ohm thermistor. I put a couple in series, which gives me over 400 ohms when it's cold. That gives you the soft start when you turn the set on. It's an inrush current limiter on the tube filaments. So it gives them a slow warm up when you turn the set on to reduce any chance of burning out a filament. So now I have to decide, do I want to keep these or do I want to replace these? I buy name brand caps that I know the specs on. I can tell that they're high ripple current, for example, super extra low ESR, extended life, etc. I know these are generic caps. I presume they don't have the greatest specs because they're inexpensive. and they're a generic manufacturer. So I probably will end up replacing them. I mean, why not? If we're going to this length to restore it. These parts aren't that old, though. I haven't seen a day code yet, but just looking at them, they don't look that old. And these, yeah, I would not use these. These cost a fraction of what, say, a vitreous enamel or silicone coated resistor are. Those, they last longer, they have thicker leads, they're more resistant to the environment. These tend to start corroding where the lead goes into the cement packaging. There's only 5 watts. Again, the ones I like to use are higher wattage. I could get the values I use are dead on to what the originals were. Plastic film, that's basically, these are the caps I would use, so I don't have any issues with that. Most of the issues I have are really with the top side. Start with the power supply. They left the original diodes in here. Those are 1958-59 rectifiers. Semiconductors are still fairly new. New rectifiers have way better specs, especially in terms of their ability to handle current surges on power up. So I would replace those. I'd use a better fusible resistor. I mean, when I put this in, maybe it was new old stock and looked great, but it's really corroded now. I don't think I would have mounted these caps here. And I'm pretty sure those values aren't right. Again, now with the internet, I can hop on the Mauser and DigiKey, and I have a wealth of parts to choose from, so it's easy to get the right values. I replace all the resistors. I also replace all the tube sockets. These old original tube sockets are really prone to failure because the metal they used is thin and they develop stress cracks. None of these sockets were replaced or reinforced or anything. Sometimes I see them where they bridge a crack with a piece of wire or glob solder onto it or something. I would have done a better job soldering the wires back on. Same with these stakes. It's just not. Looks like some of this stake I think broke off. It's fastened down there oddly. Same with that one. Yeah, in fact that stake is broken off and they just put a hunk of wire on there. So whoever did this did a heavy hand. Maybe they used a soldering gun or something like that, or maybe they just never worked on one of these before. It looks like they did a bit of damage when they pulled the board. I'm pretty sure, peering through, yeah, they didn't do anything to this section whatsoever. I unmount this when I rebuild this section, including there's one cap in here. You may have noticed on a lot of Predicta sets and vintage sets in general, there can be a faint white line or a lighter area, maybe a bar that wide or so. It's kind of a faint brighter area, a vertical, that moves with the horizontal hold, and if you tweak the fine tuning, play with the controls a little bit, you can pretty much get it to fade away. You can eliminate it entirely by tweaking the values of one of these caps in here, which I'll go through and do. That was, again, discovery by a technician. I'd love to give credit to whoever came up with it. It was shared on Facebook group recently, and I've been doing it on all these sets, and yeah. What it does is it lowers the bandwidth a little bit to prevent that coming through. What it seems to be is a ringing on the horizontal sync pulse, maybe related to the color burst. We're not quite sure about that, but if you just put a slight tweak on the filter cap after the detector, you can eliminate that. Yeah, on this board, these caps are okay. I'd want to check that. Oh no, that there's a big mistake. That is a critical part. It's a high failure part. it should be a 1000 volt cap or better. They used a 630 volt cap. Okay, that is a big red flag there. They didn't replace any of these couplates. I'm not surprised. Generally, they don't go bad, but there are resistors in here that are carbon comp and they drift high in value. This one is also involved with the circuit with a high voltage pulse. That's in the vertical circuit, and this part is known to fail as well. I replace all the tube sockets, all the resistors, all the couplates, and I use parts that are over-spec'd for their application. Aside from that, all these yellow caps look to be okay. I'd have to double check the value on them. I would not use one of these guys. They are high quality parts. It's just kind of a weird thing using this application. And one issue they have is that plastic they're made out of. It has fantastic dielectric properties, but it melts if it gets hot. These sets run warm, probably not warm enough to melt the cap by any means, but they're kind of finicky parts to, and it's not a special value. It's 3900 picofarad. I just use parts more like this. Still the original. Still the original power switch. Hopefully it's still good. So they didn't do anything with the controls. Hopefully it's just because they didn't need to. Looks like they didn't do anything to the tuner. Let's just take a look at the flyback here. Okay, they did nothing in this box except maybe blow some dust out. I recoat these. I paint this whole thing with Corona dope. I don't put new wax or reflow this wax or anything, but I paint the whole thing with Corona dope, which is a similar to a clear lacquer type product that has really good dielectric strength. It'll seal up all these cracks. It'll hold this together and provide a really good high voltage insulation for it. Well, that's what I'm going to do. It's a weird thing to restore something. Yeah, I could just go through, power it up, try to find out what the fault is and replace that and leave everything else exactly the way it is. But I know this collector wants everything really overhauled, like I've been doing for all of his other sets. So that's what I'm going to do on this. I'll be pulling this board, do all the stuff I had said, replace all these parts, and so on. And unfortunately, I'm going to, because they relocated caps and mounted them in odd places, I have to go over everything to make sure it's all done right. Now, yeah, the set was working when they were done with it, but there's working and there's working. Did it turn on and there was something on the screen, or did it turn on and there was a fantastic crystal clear picture that was perfectly locked in? That's the thing. That's what I strive for. So we'll see. We'll see how it goes. I'm just about done with work topside. I wanted to review what I did. I pulled both boards out, replaced the caps and resistors, replaced all the 9-pin tube sockets on this board. Those are the ones that are prone to failure. The two phenolic 7 pins here looked fine. This 7 pin is for the audio output tube. It was starting to deteriorate a little bit. This tube gets pretty darn hot, so I put a ceramic new socket in there. This is a cap they had underrated. They had a 630 volt cap. I put in a nice Sprague orange drop 715p rated for 1600 volts. So that's definitely over spec. I put all new couplates in. I cleaned up the board while I had it out. Now I'm reconnecting all the wires. I'm going to clean up the ones that were cut short and just kind of tack soldered on. I'll make sure they're secured tightly. This board doesn't have any paper caps, so just new resistors. And here's that cap that I replaced to eliminate that faint vertical line that can appear. Put a 22 picofarad mica cap in there. I'm getting ready to replace these two diodes. These are the originals. I'll replace them with some 1N5408s. Very robust diodes rated for 1000 volts and 3 amps. These two caps, those are the voltage doubler caps. They chose to relocate them topside, which is fine. The original specs are 140 microfarad at 200 volts and 140 at 350. They chose to use 150 at 450 for both, which is fine. It's fine. This terminal strip, I compared it to some other chassis. Apparently it's only used for the UHF option, which this doesn't have, so yeah, it's fine to use that as a tie point. They grounded one of them there. And so I'll probably just stick with that and go with caps top side as well. I'll have to remove this guy just to get at those diodes. As far as will I reuse these caps or not, here's the thing. I can't guarantee somebody else's work. So when I give this back to the owner, if I'm going to give them any sort of guarantee, warranty, whatever, it's really hard for me to do it with somebody else's work. Now the set had been restored, it was working, it stopped working. I can't realistically go back and verify that every existing component in this is good. Yeah, I could leave these in, I could power it up, and if it's okay, just assume, yeah, it's fine, and then give it back to the owner. It may seem wasteful, but if I clip these out and put brand new name brand parts in, then I can say, I put all new parts in, I'll stand by my work. It just makes life easier for both of us, I think. I'll hang on to them, maybe I'll use them in some other project, but I just, if you're questioning why am I removing parts that are probably okay, that's why. That's why. The fusible resistor was bad, and that could very well be why the set stopped working. Now, why did it go bad? It may have gone bad because some other part failed and it was drawing excessive current. That's its purpose, is to open up like a fuse when something else goes wrong. But it was definitely open. I will be putting in all new tubes. So on the bottom side, same deal. These caps, I think all these electrolytics are in the ballpark of the right values. Some of them should be 22, they use 20s. Whatever, that's not a big deal. This, I'm definitely going to rebuild that, and I will definitely replace the the thermistor with one that has better specs. But I'm inclined to try powering it up once I get the boards topside reinstalled, just to see where we're at before I go ahead and just blow through all this stuff, because like I said, it was working. So here's one of the unique things about working on a tandem set. You can have the pitcher tube away from your workbench. So here I have it on a little table, recently cleaned cable snaking over to my workbench where we have the chassis. Now I still have more work to do on it, but I wanted to power it up and see where things stood. So I've already powered it up. I know the tube filaments all light up, but I haven't done a full power up test. This is the first test with the fusible resistor installed, a new one. So let's give this a shot. Current draw is reasonable. 3/4 of an amp. Tube's warming up. Current draw is increasing. Got something out of the speaker. I also have an odd ticking sound. It's kind of coming from this area. And we have a raster. Fantastic. It's a freaky thing to see if you've never seen it before. Alright. So, what about tuning in? Well, here, you watch the screen while I manipulate the controls. There we kind of go. Ah, that's better. Tuner needs a bit of cleaning. And notice we have some pretty significant undulation in here. Now I have the old electrolytics in there. I'll be really curious to see now if I do nothing but replace those electrolytics, will that go away? We have snaking in the horizontal for sure. Other than that, that's pretty good linearity. I haven't adjusted anything yet. I opened up the connector housing and man, I just do not see any issue. I've been checking this out with all the lights off, moving the cable around. I just do not see any arcing, and nothing I do has any effect on it whatsoever. The only thing that does is if I adjust the width control. If I decrease the width, it goes away. If I increase the width so that it fills the whole screen, ticking comes back. And I don't see any issue on the back side of the wiring anywhere. All I can think is that, yeah, it still possibly be something in there. I might have a spare. The drag with this is the way these are mounted is they have little ears that twist over. You can only twist those so much before they snap off. And I'd hate to break a good control on a suspicion. But it is kind of sealed. I thought by working it back and forth it should clean it. When I adjust it, I'm not seeing any issue on the screen, so I think the control is fine. It's not. If the width control was arcing, the screen width would be going crazy like this. And there's nothing. So what the heck is going on? I could just let it go. If you're sitting back from the set, you got the sound up, you're not going to hear that.
Listen to him, but you joined another gang. 6 months later, you were in jail.
I have put my ear close to this and gone over the chassis. It seems to be in this area. So here's what I've done to try to narrow it down. I've replaced the width control. I've tried 2 different head units. In other words, a different cable, plug, and everything. I've recoated the flyback. I've cleaned the high voltage rectifier socket. I've coated it in Corona dope, coated the flyback in Corona dope. I've swapped out the horizontal output tube. I've swapped out the damper tube. I've moved all the wires around. I've observed this in the dark. There is no arcing. Do you hear that? No, you don't. At least not the ticking anymore. Sure, the flyback is ringing, but that's normal. I found the problem. Thank you for all the great suggestions that led me down the path to finding the problem. So one suggestion that got me really going in the right direction was somebody asked, hey, if you pull out the high voltage rectifier, does the ticking go away? It does. It honestly didn't occur to me that I could pull this out because I'm thinking it's a series strung set. You can't pull a tube out, but yeah, you can because the filament for this tube comes from winding off the flyback. So yes, with this removed, the ticking went away. So that sure seemed like it had to be a high voltage issue. Another suggestion I got, or comment, was that somebody fixed their problem by replacing the high voltage lead. So I figured that's relatively easy to do, so I did. That's this lead right here. It didn't fix the problem, but it sounded different. Which got me thinking, okay, it's gotta, or it very likely could be a connection on either end. Now, the bottom of that high voltage rectifier tube socket, it's super clean. I've gone over it. They have nice round solder blob connections. I put Corona dope over them. But what about the other end? It turns out that Well, I happen to have one scavenged from another set here. The high voltage lead goes into a connector just like that. And there was nothing special done to it, no treatment. It was just bare metal connection and free air, and there were some sharp edges. It's really hard to see and really hard to pinpoint the sound, but that's why I was hearing it coming from here. It was coming from right down in there. Static would build up, charge would build up on the surface, and it was discharging basically into the air. It wasn't arcing over to these pins, they're too far away, but it was sort of crackling into the air. So the final thing that fixed it was high voltage putty. I highly recommend you keep the stuff on hand. It doesn't cost much. It's really soft stuff. You break off a hunk, it's sticky, and just slap it on wherever you need it. Really handy for color sets that run on even higher voltages than this set. So there's not much of a gap, but just a little couple pea-sized pieces of putty. I pushed them down in there with a stick all around it, and gone. Problem solved. That's it. Now, unfortunately, somebody used epoxy on this one. Maybe they had the same problem. I don't know, but this ain't coming out. That stuff you could pick out pretty easily. This, not so much. Just for the heck of it, I wanted to see how these electrolytics measure up, so I pulled out my Pyramid CRA1, and I'm spot checking a few of them. This 20 microfarad 450 at 400 volts, after letting it settle for a while, had about half a milliamp of leakage current. This 150 microfarad, again with 400 volts across it, very similar. So we're on a 5 milliamp scale. It's about half a milliamp. That's not terrible, but it's not great for a new modern cap. Let's pull out a brand new 150 out of my stash and see how it compares. Here's a 150 400 volt Nichicon. After a couple minutes with 400 volts on it, it's virtually zero, just pulsing a little bit off the bottom, so obviously considerably better. Now, I'm not saying that with the amount of leakage current these existing caps have, it's an issue. I'm just saying that newer name brand caps have significantly less leakage current. And we are seeing some evidence of 60 cycle getting into the deflection circuits. I'm doing some detailing on the cabinet now, the usual Gojo followed by Oz polish. I got the chassis installed, cleaned up the knobs, installed them, and installed a replacement antenna. I need to clean that up a little bit and dig up some knobs. I don't have, it only had one knob when I got it. Predicta knobs are extremely hard to find, but luckily at least I was able to dig up a set of brown. The originals would have been more like that color, so it's not a perfect match, but hey, at least we have all the right knobs, brightness, vertical and horizontal. But before I bother with all that and installing it back, I want to make sure it still works and deal with this. Just do a final pass on the CRT cover and get that guy reinstalled, so very close to being done. Yep, the set is still working, so I will proceed with buttoning everything up.
The camera's ready, Colonel. Kids, that means the fight's got to go at least 6 rounds.
He owed me that money. He promised to pay me $10,000.
I have the set all reassembled. It's playing very well.
Don't you understand?
Clean the screen cover, put the handles back on, clean the base. So I'm calling this one done. Now these might not be exactly the original color, this light brown, but I think that looks really sharp. So this milk chocolate, almost maroon color against the blonde versus the muted light brown. And hey, I'm just glad I was able to dig up a matched set of knobs with the correct labels. So this is the last of the Predictas from the East Coast Collector, and they are all being picked up tomorrow. So, and it's a great place to end this installment. We still have one more tandem to do, and that's mine. But I think I'll take a little break. The Vintage Computer Fest Midwest is this weekend, so I'm going to take a few days away from TVs. It's almost the end of Predictapalooza as well, but I do have 2 more sets for customers as well as some of mine. So I think I'll do 3 more Predictas, 2 for customers and my tandem, and I'm taking a break from Predictas for a while. And there's a surprise coming tomorrow as well, but I'm not going to tip my hand yet. That's it for now. Thanks for watching. These are strange sets. The cables are a challenge, but I really like these little base units. I think they're kind of cute. They're very easy to move around, easy to work on that chassis with the long cable going to the CRT. Really the only issue I have with these is this itself, but that goes for all the 21-inch models. They're all a pain because of the shrinking, stinky tenite and all that. Alright, that's it. Thanks for watching.